The direction I always go in improving on stand up is just you're trying to be like more and more honest to your sense of humor without isolating the audience, because you can get like, I think every comedian, because especially like what they call like finding your voice, like that's a music term that we've co-opted. It's basically just like uh discovering your sense of humor. Like you're like, you pinpoint exactly what you find funny. So you kind of want to get people as close as possible to your sense of humor and make it and be able to
Yeah.
translate that to the audience.
Yeah.
And have them really really enjoy it. But you can't go so far deep in that now you're starting to isolate people away from.
Yeah. Comedy scene in Texas in general is like getting really solid. Like
Yeah, I
Austin
mean,
is not far away from San Antonio.
yeah, Austin is an incredible scene. Austin is an incredible scene.
It's crazy how that happened, right? Just in a short amount of time.
Yeah, I mean, well, if you,
Has it been? It feels like a short amount of time, but maybe it hasn't.
it's been, I mean, it's been like it's to grow an incredible comedy scene. It was very quickly, but when you have like one of the biggest, most famous, not just comedians in the world, but the guy who has maybe the largest media platform in the world.
Who could that be?
Yeah, moves there and then goes like, "We're building this." The message spreads pretty fast.
Yeah, yeah.
Um,
And then he proceeds to build a pretty badass theater, which I
yeah.
can't wait to check that
Oh,
out.
the club
I-
is
I have-
incredible.
You've been
Yeah.
there?
Oh, yeah, yeah, yeah.
The
The
mothership?
mothership rules, and then he also brought like a bunch of powerhouse people with him. And then Kill Tony also is like, that's such a mega platform, not just for comedy but for comics to like take off. So like all those elements coming together really just like just blew it up like crazy.
Yeah, yeah. Kill Tony. I actually shamefully have not like seen much of it, or I've got to, because I
Honestly,
hear about it almost every day.
Me neither till recently. My buddy had tickets to the show at Madison Square Garden. I went there and it was like one of the best shows I've ever seen in my life.
That's
It was
crazy.
incredible. Yeah, yeah.
So what's the general format?
They have a comedian come on and they do 1 minute of comedy, and then there's a panel of comics that kind of critique them or roast them or be like, "Hey, that was incredible." And it's very like they have sort of like cornered off sort of like the freaks and geeks of comedy in a big way. They love a freak show.
So they like when things go wrong.
Not when things go wrong, when the personality is strange. When it's like
Uh-huh.
a weird person. Like there's one girl who's blown up off of there and she has some sort of disease where she's stuck in a wheelchair. And I think it's like almost like a, like, I don't know.
Like
but
a Tourette's or
no, like she can't, like she's losing control of her body.
Oh, yeah. Okay.
And then there's the one of the oldest guy, like not oldest, but like longest running Kill Tony regulars is, William Montgomery, and I'm pretty sure he used to be like a crack addict or something like that. And like, so they really like people that were like just like one big guy on there who's one of my buddy's good buddies. I actually met him at my friend's wedding, Ari Matti. He's Estonian. He's the biggest comic in Estonia. So it's like just oddities like that from all
Yeah.
over the place. That's what Kill Tony highlights, I think, better than any platform.
That's awesome. Yeah, I gotta check it out.
Yeah.
But is that out of Austin? Like, did that come out of
they do.
Austin as well?
Well, I mean, he's been doing it for like 10 years. So it was like
Okay.
they were doing it at the Comedy Store and all that kind of stuff. And then
Right.
like it was already huge. But then I think post the Austin move, it went from like Kill Tony is, I don't know, could probably sell at like a small theater to selling out MSG, twice.
Yeah, that's insane. I mean, that's like some of the biggest. I mean, the biggest comedians.
Yeah,
like
yeah,
that
yeah.
show itself.
Oh, yeah.
Wow, that's great. Well, how about you, man? What are your plans for comedy, and like what do you got in the future?
For me, it's just like you kind of keep going forward. We're gonna record the special soon, which I'm very excited about. Yeah, because I think the product's really good, but I'm very like conscious of how long this process takes. Like you very rarely, I think some people are popping a little bit earlier. Like you have guys like Mark Norman who popped when he was like 37 or 38 or something like that. Maybe he was like 36, maybe. But like a lot of dudes pop in like their 40s.
Right.
And even for me to be at a stage where I can like sell some tickets, I'm already like very grateful for that. I think
Yeah.
that's awesome.
How long have you been doing stand up?
Like 12, well, it'll be 12 years in December.
Damn.
Yeah.
So you've been at so you started with stand up and then got into social
Yeah,
media.
yeah. If it wasn't for COVID, I probably never would have gone after social media as hard as I did. But because I couldn't do
Yeah.
stand up, I was like, what am I going to do with all this time?
Right.
Yeah. You
Yeah.
can, it was like every night was going out and doing shows. Because I've always been, I think I was fortunate when I moved to Toronto. I've been doing stand up for about a year and a half, and I was only doing it once a week. And then when I moved to Toronto, there was very much the grind mentality,
Mm-hmm.
where it was like, okay, how many shows can you do in a week? Like, that was definitely a bragging point of like, can you hit like 20 spots
Oh,
in a
yeah, yeah,
week?
yeah.
Which I think is good. I think it
I
makes
mean,
you
if you're
funny.
young and you just need reps and
Yeah.
you got to get the experience, why
I
not?
just wanted to like get on stage as much as I could, and I just kind of drove for it.
Yeah, that was early. That was early on, like 12 years ago or so
Yeah,
in
yeah, yeah.
Toronto.
I was in Toronto until 2 years ago. So I was in Toronto for 8 years, and then I did stand up about a year and a half before that. Then I moved to Toronto. Then I moved to New York in 2020. I think it was August of 2022. So I just hit 2 years in New York. And now it's like the same. I mean, New York is you can do even more shows. So like it's very. I still keep that same cadence of trying to do minimum 10 spots a week, but I want to be in that 15 to 20 range. That's like the ideal spot.
Wow, that's a lot.
I think it's like, uh, for me, stand up is it all feeds back to stand up. Like I
Yeah.
started a podcast, check it out. Dark Holes with Durena. If you guys want to go check out my podcast. Podcasts I really enjoy doing. I enjoy making content. Like there's a lot of stuff around stand up that I really enjoy doing, but the stand up has always kind of been the focal point. I wouldn't do any of this stuff if it wasn't for stand up. So it's like everything else feeds back into the stand up, right?
Yeah, I think like you can go different routes, right? But I think it seems like everybody's kind of taking a slightly different route, but it seems like you've you somehow have most people have to tie it into social media, right? Because
Yeah.
like there's a few like we have Dave Attell coming next week, and
Yeah.
I don't know how much he does. Like,
Yeah.
but he's an old school, like he's been around forever.
Yeah, so he
Um,
has a tried and true audience that is like, and they're dedicated to him, and he's like a staple.
Yeah.
Like, and if you can put David Tell on, like when I saw Kill Tony at MSG, he was one of the people who came on, like one of the people
Oh,
on
really?
the panel. So just having like David Tell can just appear on other people's stuff, and that's a massive thing.
Yeah.
But like we basically like what social media is now is like doing late night or acting was in the like 60s through to like the 2000s. Like it very up until like the mid nah, yeah, up until the mid 2000s like what's his name? Dane Cook. Like
Mm-hmm.
Dane Cook, Kevin Hart, like these dudes who started doing like Dane Cook was like, I'm gonna be the biggest comedian on MySpace, and like
right,
Kevin Hart's like,
yeah.
I'm collecting all these emails. Like before that, you really were like, how do you gain an audience? Well, you kind of like tour as an opener, and then you hopefully get like an HBO special, or you like are guest star on a sitcom, or you like there was these kind of other avenues where you would try to grow your platform,
Yeah.
and now or late night obviously was a big
Late
one.
night was huge, right?
Yeah,
You get
late
your
night.
few minutes on late night.
So now, like, growing your social media platform, regardless of whether or not that's the most, like, I really enjoy making social content. I think it's very fun, but I think some people do it as a means to an end. And whether or not you enjoy it, it is just the modern version of doing that grind.
Yeah. Yeah, it makes sense. It's like you almost have to in some ways.
Yeah.
Like and what better way for an audience member to see if they're going to kind of like you, you know? You just go online and fucking check, you know, Che Durena out and see if you laugh and like,
Yeah.
"Oh my god, I love this guy. I'm definitely like he's in town. Let's go." Like I totally get that. But it's and there's a lot of people that pop off on social media, but they don't have the stand-up background, and then they try to get it. And some people have success with that because maybe they've got a lot of natural talent. But I think it seems to be better when it's like a situation like yours, when you've already been grinding away at it for many years. How successful do you feel like you were before you kind of got TikTok famous?
I mean, I think I was appropriately successful for how long I had been doing it.
Yeah.
Like I did Just for Laughs. I did Just for Laughs like year 3 or 4. I had been on some tours within Canada. Uh, yeah, like I was passed at some of the big clubs in Toronto. So like I felt like I was appropriately successful and famous, and if anything now I feel like I'm ahead of where I should be.
Yeah.
But like I said, I'm just very grateful for that. And then it's just about to like continue to feed that and have it just hopefully keep growing.
Yeah. How did you initially get into comedy? Like, what was it when you were younger that made you want to go? I want to try to be a comedian.
I just consumed a lot of stand up. Like, it was like kind of the heyday of Comedy Central where they were putting like so many specials on there and you could watch all this stuff and it ruled. So, like, watched a lot of that. And I think that was kind of like a catalyst for it. I also did like public speaking in high school and made my speeches funny. Which I never like kind of tied the two together where I
Yeah.
was like, oh, these are kind of the same thing.
Right.
But my brother started doing stand up when I was like 21 or something. And for me, just the concept of being able to just go do stand up hadn't really existed for me. I thought you had to be famous. I thought it was like a byproduct of being famous. You're like performing for these people. Where I didn't realize it was the other way around. So that at least that was then the catalyst of me going to go do it. Cause I
Yeah.
was like, oh, well now you just go to open mics and then you can just make it happen.
Right. What do you think your strengths are as a comedian? Like on stage, what?
I think I'm pretty good at being physical. I think I'm good at painting a picture in someone's mind about like what's going on. Like I'm very good at translating the weird shit in my head and someone else's head. I'm very
Yeah.
absurd with some of my perspectives on things.
Yeah.
Um, and I think it's very approachable. Like I feel like when I'm on stage, it feels like we're just hanging out. It
Yeah.
doesn't feel like a
Yeah.
performance. It doesn't feel like, I don't know, too cerebral. I don't want to make it sound dumb, but it just like you feel like we're just hanging out, shooting
Yeah.
the shit,
Totally.
having a good time.
What are you working on to improve with your comedy?
I think the direction I always go in improving on stand up is just you're trying to be like more and more honest to your sense of humor without isolating the audience, because you can get like, I think every comedian, because especially like what they call like finding your voice, like that's a music term that we've co-opted. It's basically just like uh discovering your sense of humor. Like you pinpoint exactly what you find funny. So you kind of want to get people as close as possible to your sense of humor and make it and be able to
Yeah.
translate that to the audience.
Yeah.
And have them really, really enjoy it. But you can't go so far deep in that now you're starting to isolate people away
Yeah.
from enjoying the
Wait,
experience.
so is it like when you say your sense of humor, it's like
Yeah.
what you like,
Yeah.
what you're actually really enjoying,
Yeah.
not just trying to make them laugh. It's like you're kind of trying to bring them
want-
along to
yeah.
like, here, I want you to experience this shit because it's so funny.
That's the challenge to me. That's the challenge of stand up is that's why you see like there's like two sides of the same coin, or kind of the like shock comic and the like woke comic. They're
Yeah.
both like, oh, okay, I said something progressive, you need to enjoy this, or I said something like super crazy. It's like, oh, what, you can't handle this? Like those they're both the same person, just on different sides of the spectrum. But usually that's a very young comic. Like you get someone who's like maybe 2 to 4 years into stand up, and they feel like they're owed this laughter and this response and this adoration from the audience, when it's like, no, that's earned. Like
Yeah.
the reason they're not laughing at your stuff isn't because they can't handle it, or isn't because they're bigots or something like that.
Yeah.
It's because you haven't put in the work to translate your sense of humor to them, which is that is the challenge of what you're trying to do right now.
Right. And it's hard. It's fucking hard. It
takes-
shouldn't just come easily
Yeah.
to you, It takes a lot of years.
Takes time. I remember it wasn't until like year 7 that I started writing jokes that I was like, oh, I felt like before that I was kind of doing call and response. I was like, if I say
Yeah.
this, I know they laugh, or I know I'll get some type of laughter. But at year 7, I was like, oh no, these are things I really find funny that I can now make the audience find funny as well. And so then it was changing my writing style and then changing a lot of the ways I like came up with jokes to accommodate that and like move in that direction, because I was like, this is how you should be
Yeah.
going. And since then, I feel like my comedy has gotten more absurd, but has been able to keep people on board. And the newest stuff I'm working on, I feel like, is like the silliest, goofiest stuff. And then it's also like trying to sell stuff that you find challenging. Like I have a joke about sex work, which is basically like sucking on a prostitute's tits. And I think I'm talking about prostitution in this joke, but being able to sell it in like a really fun, goofy, charismatic way where the audience stays on board. Where like after I do that joke, because I'll do it in front of like pretty generic New York audiences, like tourists and shit, and people out with their families, and it'll work. And I'm still, the joke's probably about like, when did it? Joke's about 2 months old. Maybe less. No, it's less than that. But I'm still surprised when it works sometimes. I'm like,
I want to hear it. Can you
you'll
tell
hear it tonight.
Oh, I'll hear it tonight.
Yeah.
All right. I can't wait.
But yeah, it's stuff like that. Then there's some other like, I feel like I get more closer and closer to how I want to present everything that I'm selling and how I want to talk and how I want to move and how I want to act. And that's still refining. And sometimes I feel like, oh, I wish it was already figured out. But then like I said prior, like some of my some of the comics I appreciate and think are the greatest were like 20 years into this, before they really captured what people saw them as on stage. And that's just when they popped. And then you see them like 5-6 years after that when they put out their like magnum opus special. Like you can look at like Bill Burr when he popped, and then you look at like Bill Burr when he's like, I'm sorry you feel that way. Like those are different levels of comedian. Even so, it's like he's already famous, he's already selling out theaters, and then he gets even better after that. And so I'm like, there's still a long way to go. Basically, I guess that I'm just.
But I love that one point that you made. I think is super valuable for comedians. You know, about you have to earn it, and you have to kind of show them. They might not necessarily find those things funny, and you have to understand how to guide them into that humor. Yeah. Nothing is fucking better when you laugh at something that you didn't think you'd find funny. I love that.
And you can make it approachable and appealing, and I try not to alienate people. Like I feel definitely my audience, I can see the analytics. It's like 85% male. But then dudes bring their girlfriends to the show, and then I always hear, like almost every single show, a girl comes up to me and she goes like, hey, I came with my boyfriend. I thought this was going to be like a drag, but like, no, it's like, oh my God, it's really good. I think I get it's for women too a lot, because I think I come from a perspective that I never am trying to make someone feel bad. Everything I'm like analyzing, I'm looking at more the absurdity of it existing. And I think we can all, as a perspective, appreciate that. And that's not from like an intention to be like super inclusionary or something. That's just how I find things funny. And when something's very absurd, I find it funny. And I also don't touch like politics or anything.
When you say absurd, though, like what do you mean by absurd?
Well, exactly. Some things just them existing is absurd. Like I think one of the reasons why I talk about sex a lot on stage is because I think all of our interactions with it are absurd. Like you're supposed to feel like kind of ashamed of this thing, and you're supposed to have like a certain level of control over it, of course, but then also it's used in like not every form, but so many forms of marketing. It's also like a key part of like relationships. It's like a key part of of just like being with someone. And like, so having casual sex is like, oh, that's a bad thing. But then it's like but it's also just a fun thing.
Yeah.
And so just there's these two parallels of how something exists versus the ideology around it. That is in itself absurd. So I think that's very funny.
It is kind of absurd. I mean, everything's fucking absurd, but
there's certain things like that I highlight that I think that stick out to me that I think are funny.
Yeah. That's cool. So you're leaning towards that. You said you were kind of kind of leaning more and more towards the absurd. Is that because you just really enjoy it more than anything else?
It's just what I find funny. Like I just really try to just do. It's like, do I really find this funny? And then just lean into that. That's it. That's like I don't try to get too like I. This is the best I can like vocalize it for someone who's listening to this podcast. But I don't try to get like. What's the word like? I don't try to create like an equation for it. Like this plus this equals joke. Like if sometimes I get close to that when I'm writing, where I go like, oh, I notice if I write it in this order, then the structure of this joke makes it. Whenever I get close to that, I throw that away because I always want it to kind of feel like jazz.
Yeah.
I always want it to feel like I'm kind of coming up with it on the spot because that's how I write. Is I don't. I do sit down and write, but the writing process is I'll usually drink a Celsius, usually wild berry Celsius, because I'm convinced that the red dye in it activates like the same part in your brain that activates when you commit a homicide.
Wait, what?
No, I'm just making that up. But but I usually get like caffeinated because that gets me in like this almost like manic state. And then I will just like walk around I'll have like some topics to talk about and I'll just walk around my apartment and like ramble. Yeah. And then I'll be like, once I start making myself laugh, I go, okay. Like, then I start writing down what I'm saying and I keep going in and out of that rambling. And so it is just, I want it to be like very.
That's a cool process. You must look like a crazy person.
Oh, I close my blinds a lot. And I think my neighbor probably thinks, because I live in a little New York apartment, so he can probably hear me a lot. And so sometimes he's probably like, this dude's fucking crazy, dude. Because he's just like, the other day I was ranting about, I did this on my podcast. So I was like prepping the podcast and I was like, what should I talk about? And are you familiar with the Costco guys?
No.
The Costco guys are like this phenomenon on social media that's like this father-son duo that it's like expanded into their family and there's like this extended universe. But it just started with them going to Costco and being like, we're Costco guys. Of course we eat a chicken bake when we go shopping. And so it's just these kind of like corny Costco videos that were like kind of cringe content. And then it like has blown up into like a huge thing and they have these extended universe. And now there's this kid, the Rizzler, who's like part of the crew. And the Rizzler is like, to me, he's the most he's kind of outshined the Costco guys. And he's this little fat doughboy kid who's like, everyone loves him. And I was ranting about how we should do the same thing they do to opera singers, where we castrate him and then preserve his youth. So he stays this little doughboy forever. So I was ranting about that in my apartment to nobody, no response. And so
but it made you laugh. I was
like, this is hilarious. And then so if the what's it called?
The neighbor?
If the neighbor heard it, he probably was like, wow, this dude's fucking crazy. Yeah.
That's awesome. It's good to hear your process like that. That's cool. How your comedy comes to life.
Yeah. I think as long as I keep it loose, then it'll stay fresh from it. If it becomes, because you see some comics and you can see the like, I think even saying how I do this, it like lifts the veil a little bit, and part of the enjoyment of it is like the veil.
Yeah.
Like there's certain aspects of
you don't want it to be a formula at all ever.
No, and I don't want it to lose its fun and charm for people who enjoy it. Because they can see the tricks when you can see the magician's tricks behind the scenes. And so if I don't even know how the tricks are made, how the fuck are you going to know how the tricks are made? I don't even know, dude.
You're barely aware. You're pacing around.
Dude, I'm fucking, I got a wild berry Celsius in one hand and I'm screaming in my apartment, dude. Oh my God. Yeah, I use like, you can't crack this code. I don't know the code, dude. But yeah, so I think that helps keep it super fun and fresh for me. Because I thought about... like, I love video games so much, and I think, like, being a stream, like, I stream and stuff, but I do it not, like, a lot of streamers stream, like, 5 days a week and, like, 8 hours a day, and I'll stream, like, twice a week, and for, like, 3 or 4 hours, and
on, like, a Twitch account?
TikTok, it goes everywhere, but that stuff, I've kept in a space where I still very, very much enjoy it, because I never would want to lose my love for video games, because I think that would really take a lot of joy out of my life. But I've heard about like developers talking about like fighting games, and in a fighting game there's a thing called a hitbox. Well, they're not just in fighting games, but in there's a thing called a hitbox where it's basically when these two things make contact, that's when the damage happens. And so they stop seeing like the characters and they see the hitboxes moving around because they can see the game almost like in a Matrix sense. And I'm
Sure.
like, does that ruin it for you? Because there's some comics I watch now. I still watch a lot of comedy, and sometimes I'm watching comedy, and it is very much homework. And I'm like, okay, what's good about this? What's good about that? This I don't, because as you refine your sense of humor as a comic, less stuff appeals to you. Because you're like, oh no, this isn't my taste. I don't like this. I don't like that flavor. I don't like this. Which means you can find stuff really potent that makes you laugh, but that means less stuff is gonna like kind of touch or titillate you. But then there's still like people like, I don't know, the greats, like, yeah, if you have like Chappelle or Louis or Burr or like Shane, like these guys are still so incredible that it's like there's no, I don't think there's any level of
Like cracking the code.
that could make them not appealing.
Yeah. But from what we're talking about, to me, what I take away the most from is it's like the underlying inspiration, the underlying real, like, fun or enjoyment of what you're creating. That however you get there, and maybe that changes and evolves. Maybe there isn't one way that you could consistently, one formula that you could come up with to prepare that would lead you to creating. You know what I mean?
I think it's already like shifted and changed so much.
Yeah. It's gonna shift and change as you change and
Yeah,
evolve.
and it'll that process, as long as I think it's as it keeps, because that's part of the that's part of how when people get stale with certain aspects of anything. I noticed that I used to be a scuba diving instructor,
Yeah?
and I noticed it a lot there where when you're
I wouldn't have pegged you as a scuba diver.
no,
I
yeah.
don't know why. I mean,
I don't know. But there's a very clear, like, if you're like a certain level instructor, you can only teach certain level people. And then as you want to move up, there's like clear levels. You have to get like certified for the next level. And something I noticed in that system was when someone stayed at one level, it was about like 2 years. After the 2 year point going into year 3, that's when people started to get frustrated with the work because the work wasn't challenging and interesting anymore. It was frustrating because you were encountering the same problems over and over again. And when you encounter the same problems over and over and over and over again, and then you don't bring in new challenges, then the work is no longer interesting and it just becomes frustrating. So I think as long as I'm continuing to like evolve how I'm challenging myself with stand-up, like going on the road in the States, doing bigger and bigger shows, writing with new people, creating content in different ways. Like starting this podcast was now a whole new way for me to be expressive and work on my comedic voice.
How long have you been doing the podcast?
We're only like 5 or 6 episodes in.
Oh,
I think,
sweet. It's
yeah,
brand new.
it's brand new. Yeah. But that's been like, I'm super excited about doing it, and it's giving me a lot of, and it giving me a lot of joy, and it's challenging me in new ways. Like keep all this stuff exciting for me. So I think you bring those things around to keep the main thing interesting. Like in the scuba diving, you would still be scuba diving every day, but there's new challenges brought in. You're teaching different level divers, so now you have like advanced divers, and you're taking them in a wreck rather than beginner divers who are like kicking up the reef. And so those new challenges are fun.
Right. Or if like something new comes into the system, right? Like that wasn't there before. Like suddenly, I don't know, the area, like things change in the environment.
Social media.
Got to deal with. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. That was like a huge thing that people either took that and ran with it, or like you, or didn't.
And what you have to, like, the people who didn't, you have to realize that you go, oh, like the way things were better. Like anyone who has that perspective is, I don't know if I want to say wrong, but that's the world. The world only, it's not even necessarily shifts forward. Like it just changes. Yeah. The world will constantly be shifting and changing. And if you expect your perspective and your reality to like be held in time and be the only thing that like no, everyone should do it the way I want it to be done. That's a crazy
It
perspective.
is.
Human civilization is just going to keep shifting a certain
Everything.
direction, and it's your job to adjust to it. You can't expect it to hold
Right.
on and wait for you.
Don't they say with like species that survive the longest, like on this planet, they've always had the trait of adaptation. They've been the
That's
strongest at adapting.
you gotta shift with, because it's like, okay, so let's say a guy who's like, you used to just go on the road and you would tour and you would build an audience and da da da. It's like, okay, you go back further. It's like you used to have to do the Tonight Show. Okay, you go back further. You used to do the Catskills and there'd be a board of jokes and you would cross them out as people did them. And you just like, we used to do the circus. And then when you would come to town, you're the only thing in town. Like, like, yeah, it's just gonna keep trending in that direction, and it's up to you to adjust to the, or not. You can just not. Like, there is also a reality where, like, I mean, if you want to do not even just stand up, if you want to do a thing that is shifting, then you usually have to adjust towards it. Or you could just be like, fuck this, and like sell everything you own and like move to like a fishing village in like, I don't know, Bali, and then just live there. That's
Your same way of stand up there.
I mean, this is the idea that you give up on that and you go like, but I want to exist in a certain way that isn't tied to this like constant flowing motion like that.
Sure.
Yeah.
Yeah,
That's
you
also a possibility.
I love your crowd work.
Uh-huh.
I think it's like like we were talking about before. It's very like chummy.
You saw a special version of it here. This is the crowd work I did at these shows last time was so good that I almost released it as like a little special.
Oh, we should have.
I think I still have the footage, but I just released it in clips. But it
Yeah.
those were two very magical nights.
Those shows were so
They were
good.
unbelievable. But I've been doing way less crowd work. Just because I got a little bit tired of the questions and that side of the show. And I felt like it was, the reason I was doing it was just to like feed what the internet wants and just be able to put out these crowd work clips.
How could you not think like that when you're constantly doing that every day?
True. And at the start, I think it was working well, but then I started kind of like running out of questions, and I'm just kind of letting stuff happen organically when it does, and then be like, that's a clip, and then not really worry too much about crafting a moment, and just let the moments happen if they do happen, and then just work on the hour every time, and like just really work on like putting all that, because now what you'll see tonight is probably about a 50-50. You'll see like 50% of the special and 50% brand new stuff that I've never done in one chunk together before.
50% of the new special that will be coming out
Yeah.
soon? Yeah.
So because like, yeah, I would say probably about 50% of the special I've written since I moved to New York, because that's just like the stuff that I think is some of the tightest shit that I've made. But some of that stuff was written post and like crafted and like perfected post doing the show here. So some of the stuff you're gonna see is gonna be special stuff, and then the rest of it is like all new shit that hopefully will be on the next special. But it's just working on that, and like that's kind of, I want to see how those pieces flow together, and that's also been like, I'm not getting as much content out of every show, which I don't think that should always be the concern. Like obviously you need your content, you need to sell tickets as part of the game, blah blah blah. But doing everything as like one big piece all the time now, the pieces come together in different ways, and you learn how to move stuff around. And then I write, like when I sometimes get into the same sort of mind frame, same sort of like manic energy when I'm writing, I'll get into that mode on stage. And if the audience is like, it's because I get a lot of leeway when I'm doing these shows because they're my audience. So I can really play around with them, and I can go on these long tangents and riff. And sometimes those riffs will translate to a non-fan audience. Like I feel like the riffs usually always hit with my people.
Right.
And then the test is, take this, go back to New York, performing in front of people who don't know who you are. And if it hits now, it's like, now we're cooking.
Is that usually the case in New York? Is there a lot of tourists, a lot of people like
Yeah,
in
you get
clubs there
a
that
mixed audience. Like depending on where you like, if you're in Midtown, close to Times Square, you're gonna get a very different audience, a type of person than if you're like downtown. Like I think downtown you're getting like a savvier, younger crowd. You're gonna get like more of like a family energy up in Midtown. So you get different when you get like out into Brooklyn. You're probably gonna get like people that actually live in New York. But you get different vibes depending on where in the city you are. But that it's more the if your joke kills in front of your audience, that's great. That's awesome that they love it. But it needs to kill in front of the audiences that don't know you too.
right? But were you talking about your riffs?
Yeah,
Yeah,
because sometimes you go on a long
right.
riff when you have a bit, or you have an idea. Like one of my better jokes right now was an idea that I was like, I don't think I'm gonna do this as a joke. It was like an experience I had. Is the sucking on tits? I brought this up already, right?
Yeah,
Yeah, it was the sucking
yeah.
on tits thing. So I was like, I don't think I'm gonna do this as a bit. And then I think I was in San Jose. No, not San Jose, San Diego. And I was just riffing it at one show, and it went really well. And then I was like, all right, let's bring it back to New York and let's see. And then it worked. And like I told you, every time this joke works, I'm still like, I can't believe that people are taking it in. And so I just kept working and working and working it. And it was like, okay, this applies. And that's happened quite a few times, but it's also happened in the opposite way where something kills in front of my audience. And then I take it back to people who don't know me. And then they're like, And then if they go, then it's like, okay, then it doesn't live.
Yeah. Is New York a better place than Toronto for your like just getting
For stand up?
yeah,
Yeah,
just,
for sure.
like
Yeah.
by a long shot?
Yeah,
Or, like,
unquestionably.
is it like the best in the world? Is it, it's probably like
I mean, it's hard to say like what is best in the world. It depends on what you do with your craft and what you're trying. Like New York is great for just getting up on stage constantly. But so is Austin. Austin has a great comedy audience. Is a great comedy town with tons of stage time. And then LA, you're not going to get as much stand-up stage time. I don't think anyone, even any of the LA comics would argue that. You're not going to get as much stage time for stand-up, but you're also going to get way more opportunities for like podcasting, writing, acting, and all these other avenues that are going to boost your platform and give you ways to express yourself comedically that aren't just stand-up. And it depends on what you want to do.
how important is it to just diversify like podcasting? Like is that do you feel like the more platforms that you have, the more
I think like it I think having a social media platform is just a necessity. Like I think not only is it just like the way you sell tickets and how people discover you, but a lot of like clubs and bookers and reps won't fuck with you if you don't have the social. But I think there are some that are better than others. Like it's like, oh, every comedian has a podcast. Yeah, I think every comedian should, because I think so much of the podcast space is dominated by comedians. I mean, the biggest podcast in the world is a comedian. And like there's all these people that have broken off from him that are stand-ups. So the conversion rate, because that's a big thing too. Like a lot of my people who follow me aren't necessarily stand-up fans or have ever even been to a show. And what you learn from doing social media is you're not going to take a TikTok user and get them to come watch you on YouTube. You might get some of them, but those are people who already kind of use YouTube. If you're like what platform do you use the most?
probably YouTube?
YouTube. So you're a YouTube guy. So if I post something on Twitter or TikTok, you'll probably never see it. And if I'm on YouTube and I go, hey, come watch my TikTok, you're not going to like download TikTok to watch it. That's just not what people do. So you need to build your audiences natively on those platforms in order to have a strong following on all these individual platforms. Now, what that means in terms of the podcasting is so much of the space is dominated by comics. So your conversion rate from podcast listener to ticket buyer is has a higher chance of being high. Where like someone who watches like my TikTok sketches, they're not necessarily ever going to go to a
That's a
comedy
great
show
point.
in their life.
Yeah.
So that's why I think,
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. I never thought about it like that. But you're right. Like if people that are interested in comedy are watching a lot of podcasts and getting familiar with comedians.
we're just way more likely to go to a show. Like I don't go to live shows almost ever. I don't like live. It has to be like I saw Louis. The only reason I'm so happy I saw Kill Tony because it was one of the greatest shows I've ever seen. But my friend had free tickets to both nights, and he was like, "Do you want to go with me?" And I was like, "Nah, I got spots." And he was like, "It's Madison Square Garden," and I was like, "I guess," just because I don't go to live shows, and that's just me. That's just me. Like I don't know. I love sitting inside playing video games. I'm an indoor kid, man. But it's just not something I do. But like if you're trying to convert me into a ticket buyer is way harder, even with a free ticket. I was like, man. So you want to be converting people who that's already part of what they do because people don't shift too far off of where they land. Like dudes buy Levi's and then they buy Levi's till they die. Not because Levi's is the best brand because that's where they're comfortable and that's what they do and that's what they know and that's where they find their enjoyment. Not a lot of people explore.
Yeah. That makes a lot of sense. So you kind of just raise up as many platforms as you can, try to hit them all. You're hitting a lot of different kind of groups. So before we started the podcast, we were talking a little about dopamine.
Mm-hmm.
So just still curious about like you love video games. How does and you're about 2 times a week, like 8 hours a day online with
not 8 hours. No. We do like four.
Okay, cool. How does that affect your comedy? Does it ever affect it negatively? Does it affect it positively?
Yeah, for sure. Some nights I stay up way too late and stuff like that. Just like it's like anything, just indulging in something. But I don't see myself ever not playing video games. Like it's been like such an like some of my earliest memories are Nintendo Entertainment System when I was like 3 years old. Like I remember the house I grew up in, which we left when I was 4. I remember the Nintendo Entertainment System in there. I remember my sister's friend bringing over a Super Nintendo.
Was it the Super Nintendo?
Yeah,
okay.
bringing over
or was it the original that you had?
Well, no, we had the Nintendo Entertainment System was the original,
Okay.
and then my sister's friend brought over the Super Nintendo. I remember going to daycare as a kid, and my the lady who I go to daycare for, Josie, she had a Super Nintendo and playing like Donkey Kong Country there and playing Super Mario World, and like these are some of like my foundational. Like I watch video game trailers and get goosebumps sometimes. It's like it's like hardwired.
You can, like, the visceral feeling of like blowing the cartridge.
Yeah,
like
it's such like an integral part of my enjoyment in life, and like yeah, there's like a dopamine aspect to it of like it's like triggering you like a drug, but like dopamine's just a general motivator for anything. You need dopamine to like want to go eat food.
Yeah.
So and like I said, I think it's the best form of entertainment. I just don't see a world where I don't play them unless, I don't know, something crazy happens like nuclear war. Yeah, I guess, yeah, it could affect my stuff negatively, but I also try to not be too focused on the constant work. Like, I think I work hard, and I think I put a lot of time into getting stuff done. I've been like putting a lot of like effort into my body and stuff recently. Like this is probably the worst shit I absorb, but I love it. But I've been like eating super clean, eating only whole food,
drinking that much,
not drinking. I'm in the gym now, like 4 or 5 days a week. I'm trying to get that up to 6 days a week. Like I'm really taking care of myself really good right now. But there's a certain point where it's like I've gone on the road with like really big comedians, and then I see their life, and it's like you do work to like keep doing the work, and I'm like, when do I get to just chill?
Yeah,
I want to chill eventually.
Enjoy it,
I want to enjoy and sit back and talk to my friends and go on live or go online with my buddies and fuck around and play a video game and hang out with my sister and my family, and like I want to do those things, and like if I'm working just to do more work, I'm like that just doesn't seem like it's good.
It's almost like we all need these like gauges that can kind of tell us when we're imbalanced. Cause yeah, who the fuck wants to live and like just drive all the time? Like you're with a friend, but it's like well, is this valuable to my career? Or
Yeah.
and I know, I mean, I myself fall into that. I'm like on vacation and I'm like feeling bad about it because
Yeah.
it's like, hey, I need to move things forward, you know?
Yeah, so I try to be, and I mean I definitely if I was working all the time or working more, but like I could be further probably, but then it's like I don't know for what. For
Yeah,
what? Like,
I know.
one of my buddies put it really well, where a bunch of us went up to his cottage. There was like 10 of us. We're all comics, and he has like a shitty cottage where the toilet doesn't work. And it's like, and we just like hang out there. We like ride a bicycle down to the lake, and there's like a plumbing toilet there.
Yeah.
And so like we have like
Yeah.
that's where we go shit, and you piss in the woods, and we like hang out and do mushrooms and like walk through the woods and like go on hikes. And that condensed period of time of being like 10 dudes talking shit, doing mushrooms in the woods, in a shitty place where the toilet doesn't work, is like some of the most enjoyment.
It's like happiness.
Oh, dude, we're going again this year, and it's like like so excited to go, because it's gonna be so fucking good.
Yeah.
But yeah, I don't know, like, what am I, like, it's like, oh, okay, we're going to go on, like, a yacht or a private jet or something, and I'm like, why? Well, I don't, is it better? It's not.
So you can say you've gone on a private jet or
and
a
I'm,
yacht
and
to
I'm
the
sure
next
it's cool. I'm
person
sure, and for some
great,
people that is important to them. I'm not
Yeah.
trying to take that away from everyone.
No.
It doesn't bring me the happiness that I'm craving. So I'm not seeking it. Yeah, I can't remember what the original question was. Does video games take away
I
from?
think so, but I think I'm like searching for this, like figuring out, the balance of what you're going after, like your career, your skills in that career are super high. Like you could take it anywhere, right? You could punch that and go really, really far with the comedy. You love video games. Like I was just curious, like how far are you going with that? How do they affect each other? But I'm thinking from that perspective of like driving, endeavoring. Like,
I'm trying, like, I don't want to take away from myself. Like, I try to work really hard, and I want to take this as far as I can take it, but I don't want to sacrifice. I will, I've sacrificed a lot, but there's certain things I don't want to sacrifice. I don't want to, like, just be working for work's sake. Like, I always want there to be, like, some play involved, because it's like, what the fuck are you doing it for? Like, we became comedians, dude. But I became comedian to work all day long.
Well,
like, what the fuck?
I know, totally. Well, maybe we should probably end with this. I'll tell a little story about you from last time you came, and how I think this whole podcast, like, coming together is like, you have a lot of fun on stage in your life too. We haven't even gotten. There are plenty other podcasts with you about your life and how much fun you have. But yeah, I think that comes through in your comedy, which I think is valuable for people. Like, just, the moments where you share how you enjoy either the comedy or your sex life or whatever. But yeah, so you were leaving. It was like after the last show, and like we were coming up the stairs, and we're like, let's Jay's in the lobby. Let's go say what's up. And then you were with two girls, and
Yeah.
you were with two girls in there, and then we were about to, and then you were like making out with the two girls, and we're like, oh wait, maybe we shouldn't disturb, like in the lobby of the show that you just did. Like, we were like, were these just like two audience members? Like, this is
yeah,
crazy.
that was just that was like so serendipitous how that all came together. It was one girl. So it was crazy. It was a girl off of Tinder made a Tinder account. I was literally swiping Tinder when I was in Chicago, and her Tinder account was like, I'm only here for Durena. Like, she made a Tinder account, which is crazy. So obviously she was like coming to the show. She was new in town and all that stuff. And so I like match her and then start like talking to her and stuff. She gets sat at a table with another single chick. It's just two single chicks who came to the show with the intention to bang me at the table together. And then so after the show, we're all like chopping it up and hanging out. And then they're kind of getting vibey and they start kissing, and then we start making out. And I was like, let's fucking go. Let's cook. And then, yeah, we did have a threesome, which was great. It was just like, what are the chances of that?
so absurd the
What are
way that you've structured your career, and like girls go to your show to hook up with.
That's not that crazy. It's people have been fucking entertainers since the dawn of time.
It's true. It's true. It's true. Well, hey man, I hope it happens tonight for you if that's what you're going for.
Let's hope. Let's hope over here. I really got to pee though, so can we wrap it
Yeah,
up?
man, let's wrap it up. Let's have a great show tonight. Thank you
Thank
for
you.
coming on. Thanks for your time, man.
Dude, thank
And,
you. Appreciate you having me.